do use the phrase special edition of the Fox Football podcast with some sort of regularity, but it certainly fits the bill this time around, Simon Hill, because not only do we have a very special guest in today, we've got the cameras in, which exemplifies just how much of a special guest is with us today.
Is the hair okay, Garby?
The head's okay. The shirt's
okay?
not. The man's
shirt's always good, mate. I've got 100 of these.
That's a shame. But other than that, we are delighted to be here, no doubt, because we have a very special guest with us.
We do. Socceroos goalkeeper and Genk goalkeeper, or at least when he's fit. And unfortunately, at the moment, he's not. But it is an absolute delight and a pleasure to welcome one of the great guys and one of the great keepers of Australian football, Danny Vukovic. Great to see you, Danny.
Thank you, guys. That's a nice introduction there.
Well, it's true. Every word is true.
Thank you.
And we're delighted to have you back in Australia. Although, actually, probably not, Garby, because really you should be playing. But we know the issue at the moment. You've torn your Achilles. How did that happen, and where are you at with your recovery?
It's of course disappointing. Nice to be back home, but not under these circumstances. Happened in the gym doing box jumps, something I've done pretty much every week in my career. And last repetition, last set, I just felt a big snap, and that was it.
Ouch.
It's a shame. Welcome, Vuka. Great to have you back in Oz. Great to have you in the studio. Talk us through the rehabilitation then here and in Belgium, and also how the club has been during this, because you've been an important part of the setup there last year. How have they been with you through what is a lengthy injury layoff?
They've been unbelievable, really, really good, allowing me to come back to Australia to do part of my recovery. I've only been walking for about 4 weeks, so still kind of learning how to walk again. So still got a long way in front of me, but I'm determined to get back.
Never mind the mob that Simon is portraying here, Man City. You missed the Liverpool game in the Champions League, which was no doubt a massive shame.
Yeah, it was. It was the one game I was really looking forward to, the biggest club in our group, of course, the European champions. I watched them actually live the other week. Incredible just to see, Salah, Mane, Firmino was incredible. So I'm missing out on some big matches, but, that's football. Not much I can do about it.
I might be wrong here, but I don't remember you having many big injuries throughout your long career. Arguably, this is probably the biggest. How tough is it mentally to be able to deal with it? Because I know, having spoken to a lot of footballers in the past, when you're injured, you're almost dead in a sense, aren't you, football-wise? And you can become very isolated from the team environment. You must have to be quite tough mentally to deal with such a lengthy rehab.
Definitely. This is by far the biggest injury, of course. I think in my career, I've probably missed less than 5 games due to injury. Of course, I've been dropped, Melbourne Victory and things like that. But yeah, you certainly do feel isolated. I've spent most of my time in the gym when I have been back. The boys are going out onto the pitch all the time. So it's tough, but, you just have to work through it, and there's the light at the end of the tunnel that I've got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, we can't wait to have you back. Well, this is a special edition podcast. It's still the normal rundown. We'll still go through all the games from the weekend, and we've got your Twitter questions, which are fantastic. We'll look at some matters overseas, some other big talking points in Australian football, and get into to detail in Danny's career a bit later on, and go back through the years and talk about some of the high points and a couple of other moments as well. But before we get on to that, your son is a wonderful story. We all know what he's gone through. Anyone who follows Australian football, the hardship of the operation he had to have, which has changed his life and your life, and now all the joy that you get when he celebrates with the Genk fans over there in Belgium, and he's the unofficial team mascot in a sense when you play, at least. Can you talk us through what that's been like, the lows and then the highs, and what you're experiencing with your young boy Harley right now?
It's just amazing to see him healthy every day, and of course to share the experience on the pitch after a win. We sort of got into a bit of a habit last season, the championship year for us. The first game I think we won, and he came out on the pitch and celebrated. The fans loved it, and they were asking for him to come out every game. So he thinks that the fans are there for him. He comes to the game, and all he wants to do is come on the pitch, and he's asking his mum to come on the pitch for the 90 minutes. So he's the mascot there, and they love him.
So he's gutted at the moment that you're injured because he's not getting to experience that on a weekly basis.
He doesn't completely understand why it's he's not at the games anymore, but he'll be back out there when I'm fit.
Good stuff.
And his health is fine. He had a kidney transplant, if that's correct. How's he going now?
Yeah, his health's good. It was a liver transplant.
Liver transplant, sorry.
Yeah, he's really good. We went from being at the hospital nearly every day. Now we go every 3 months for a checkup, and the doctors are really happy with him. He has a few ongoing issues that he's going to have for the rest of his life. He has to be on medication for the rest of his life, but yeah, it's a small price to pay from going from where we were.
It's great news.
Great to hear. Great to hear. While you've been back, you've been watching some football as well. Let's get into it. What caught your eye from the weekend? Danny Vukovic, kick us off.
I think my choice will be the Mariners and their performance in Perth. I thought it was a wonderful performance, very professional from a pretty young side. I think Alan Stajcic got them playing really well. I was really impressed with Daniel De Silva as well. I think he's matured now, I think, into the player that I think we all know that he can be, and I think he's a very important part of their team. And the other boy that scored the goal, Silvera, I thought was really good.
Are the Mariners still the club that you look out for most? You played for a few, obviously.
I don't look. There's a couple that I've played for there. I think I've got a soft spot, of course, for all of them. But I think with what I did at Sydney with the team and breaking all the records, that's kind of the team I look out for at the moment. So
fair enough.
Sorry to all the other ones. I love you all, but yeah.
Just while we're on the Mariners, I will get your point from the weekend in a moment, Simon. It just sparked my memory. Matty Ryan obviously played there as well. You two have a pretty special relationship, don't you? You and Matty. He basically helped get you to Genk. Can you talk us through that? Because in a sense, you're rivals for the national team, although you're not, as we know.
Yeah.
Talk us through that relationship and how he helped you get this move to Europe.
Yeah, so me and Matty have gone down the same path, really. We're both born out west, both went to Westfield Sports High School, both products of John Crawley. But he was at Genk actually, and on loan at Genk, and they knew he was always going to be leaving, and his agent, this was at the time when I was playing for Sydney FC doing well, and his agent wanted to get in contact with me and basically got in contact with me, and the ball started rolling, and it went really quick after that.
Amazing. So he basically helped get you to Europe, which is incredible. There was a moment in the Asian Cup where you were obviously there as number 2, basically, to Matty Ryan, and we were interviewing Graham Arnold, pitch side, the journalist, and out of the corner of our eye, we saw a keeper flying across the goals, making an awesome save, and we all stopped the interview because it looked like such a brilliant save, albeit through half of one eye. We turned around and said, who was that? Was it Matty Ryan? Was it Mitch? It was Danny Vukovic. And Arnie said to us, he's just flying at the moment. He is just playing that well. If, God forbid, something happened to Matty, Matty is the number 1 and he obviously rates him super highly. If something happened, we wouldn't lose too much. What do you make of that? And I guess the fact that Matty's number 1, but at that stage, you were right up there with him at your peak.
Yeah, I think that's just down to where I'm at the moment, playing in Europe, and at the time we were playing really well at Genk, and it's just something about being in national team camp. I think it's the best thing for a footballer to represent your country, and yeah, I think I was flying at the time. I think I was still flying coming into the Champions League, and then this injury came. But it's not such a bad thing to be behind Matty Ryan. I think he is world class, and we're really lucky to have him. And
you're flying across the pitch when he saved that penalty against Uzbekistan in the shootout. You were the first bloke over there. Never mind being the number 2 keeper. You were the first bloke over there to celebrate with him.
That's it. We don't
Goalkeepers union, huh?
That's it. It's all about the union. I think the strikers, the attackers always get the credit. So it's nice when the goalkeeper can win the game for you.
Good stuff. What caught my eye this weekend, sort of similar to Danny's in a way, very impressed with Samuel Silvera. Almost couldn't get the name out there. He looks to be a real talent. He's direct, he can dribble, he's not scared to shoot, and he shoots, as we saw against Perth, with real accuracy. Just to broaden that out a little bit, isn't it great to see so many young kids getting an opportunity at the start of this season. Whether that's because of the extended benches that have been brought in, I don't know. But this is what we've been crying out for a long time, for youngsters to get an opportunity. And specifically, I just wanted to point out, and I know Danny is going to agree with this because he's a product of Western Sydney, but this area is obviously ripe with talent because Silvera came through the Wanderers youth system. At the weekend, we had Daniel Wilmering, Keanu Bacchus, Costa Grosas, Tas Mordekutis, all for the Wanderers. Jake McGing was formerly with the Wanderers, came through that system. He played for Brisbane. Moody Najjar, Rami Nazarene for Melbourne City. And I suppose you could also include Josh Sotirio as well for Wellington Phoenix, although he was on the bench. So that's 9 in total, young or youngish kids that have come through that sort of development phase and from that area at Western Sydney. So I think it's fantastic to see. And obviously, from the national team's point of view, that can only be healthy.
Especially on a weekend when the Joeys just won through to the round of
Absolutely.
16. You got boys like Connor Metcalf and Dennis Jonro who are doing really well for Melbourne City and some others. It's healthy right now. I mean, the Zlatan Ibrahimovic subject has been a big talking point, but this is the other side of it. Without the big name marquees, young boys are getting a chance, and they have been honest, the A-League, in saying we want to promote more young players. They've extended the benches as a result, and we're seeing the product this season.
And it's exciting. I think it's exciting for fans. I don't know whether you agree, Danny, but when a lot of the time, I'd never heard of Samuel Silvera before the FFA Cup started. I'm sure I wasn't alone in that. And all of a sudden, you see this kid. You go, whoa, okay,
look at
he can play.
Alassane Touré as well.
Al Hassan Touré is another one who's just like rocketed to the forefront of people's minds. So I think it's exciting for supporters as well.
Definitely, I think everyone wants to see the fresh faces coming through, and for the national team going forward, we need these guys coming through, and this is where they earn their money on the big stage.
Mine is the ultimate contrast to that. The evergreen Scott McDonald in the twilight of his career, producing a big moment on the weekends. We thought that his time 6 months ago was just about done. He certainly did. He thought he was retiring. But, he's got the chance at Western United and he delivered on the weekend, the winner in the derby. That caught my eye more than anything on the weekend because I think it's a great story. Scott McDonald, I think, has got an unfair tag in Australian football. That Scott McDonald never scored for the Socceroos is a tough thing to carry with you throughout your career, especially when you scored so much over in Europe and in the Champions League for Celtic and things like that. He deserved better than that. The system never suited him.
No, he was unfortunate.
He was. The culture in the squad, for whatever reason, he was a player that was at times labelled as being difficult to deal with, and when he was on the cusp of a squad, he was maybe discarded. Certainly 2010 World Cup, he feels as though he was for that reason, other than his actual playing quality. So it's been difficult on him. He wanted to come back with all that in mind and prove himself in Australia and show the fans that he can score goals over here and that he wasn't just someone who got on the end of good service at Celtic, if you like. So to do that at his age, and you see what it meant to him on the weekend, I just thought it was a great Aussie football story.
I always thought that at his time with the Socceroos, don't know if Danny agrees, but we had Josh Kennedy, and it was the classic big man, little man. If you could have played that 4-4-2 system, diamond or flat 4-4-2 or whatever, I think those two would have provided a lot of goals. And certainly Josh, I think, would have provided a lot of goals for Scott because he would have played around him, but it never really worked out that way.
Yeah, I think he's a player that needs to play off another striker to be brought into the game, but watching him, he looks really fit. I know he's getting older, but he looks good. Good.
Played well too.
He discusses that in detail, the formations and that in his career and how it didn't suit him in a podcast we did in January on this network. So if you haven't listened to it, scroll through and you'll find it. There were times, when he did play with Josh. And for the Joeys, speaking of that, in 1999 when they made the final, they played together up front and showed they had a great combination. But he wasn't given that opportunity. He's playing in a completely different position now, almost deeper in midfield, and he's flourishing. So it's great to see. Let's speak about that game because it was a belter on Saturday night, the victory Western United. Western United winning 3-2. It is a derby, whether you think it's not. I mean, it simply is a Melbourne fixture, and Western United rose to the occasion and put some more pressure on Marco Kurz.
Yeah, is Marco Kurz in a bit of trouble already? I mean, it's very early to be saying that, but obviously the expectations, and Danny knows this, at Melbourne Victory are huge. They're a big club, and they say they're a big club. They don't shy away from it. So, Danny, you having played there, given that they're struggling in the early part of the season, how long do you think before the players start to feel that?
I think they're feeling it already. I feel for the coach. I think they've lost a lot of quality this off season going into the new season. To lose who they lost, Barbarouses,
Antonis,
Honda,
Troisi,
and the captain Valeria as well. All big players to take out of the team. It's always going to be difficult. So they really need to turn it around soon because the season will get away from them.
How big a hole does Carl Valeri... Look, everybody focuses on the attacking side of the pitch, which we understand because that's where the headlines are made. But how big a hole does somebody like Carl Valeri leave? Not just in terms of his on-pitch play, but his leadership as well. You played with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important to have a leader like that. And I think on the pitch, he directed traffic. He pulled players into position and kept the structure in the team, and maybe that's what they're missing a little bit. Certainly off the pitch, he kept everyone grounded, and when we needed a lift, he was there to pick the boys up.
Big for Western United, though. I mean, they are rising to the occasion very early on in their tenure. I mean, these derby games, they're embracing the challenge, and they've put on social media Besart Berisha's pre-game huddle speech where he basically says, this is what it's all about. Games like this, we need to make a name for ourselves in these contests as players and as a club.
Well, Garb, this is about building not just their on-pitch value, but it's about building their identity off it as well. Now, this is the first story, if you like, of Western United, apart from their first game and their first goal. But, this is the first real defining moments. I think you could sense that at the end of the game. They celebrated it as though they'd almost won the grand final. That's how much it meant to them because it's about putting a building block in place. And they had a fair few fans there as well, which I thought was great. Now, personally, I would have much preferred that game to have been played at Amy Park.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know
because
why
the atmosphere there would have been so much better than at Marvel Stadium.
Yeah.
I understand why they do it, financial considerations, etc., etc. But we've got to get away from this playing at big oval stadiums. Yeah. We've been through this before. But I thought overall that was a terrific performance. I'm going to split one hair with Western United. That away kit is horrible. Horrible.
The white, I have to agree. Yeah, the home kit's nice. Maybe the away kit needs to change.
What's the favourite kit? Not the favourite team you've played for, but your favourite kit, the one you put on and you went, I love this more than any other, albeit goalkeepers' ones are slightly different.
No, I was putting players. I grew up in a Serbian household, so it was Red Star Belgrade instead of an Zvezda. So Miloš Dejanek, maybe he can send me one of his shirts.
There you go. The request has been put in.
Yeah, but
signed.
So no, doesn't have to be signed, but look, it's part of the background, and that was the team growing up.
What's the pink one you used to wear? Was that at the Mariners?
The ones that I wore, pink was at Sydney, actually, yeah. Not a huge fan of pink. I thought it was a little bit too out there, but
now, I'm a traditionalist, Danny.
Yeah.
Goalkeepers should wear green jerseys.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of I just like the all black. That's probably my. I wouldn't mind all white as well. That's not too bad, but not into these.
All black's quite slimming as well.
I need that. I think so. Especially now.
You're not alone, mate. Don't
after 3.5 months of not training, I certainly need the slimming.
You're in great shape, but Simon and I, well, not you, Simon, but certainly me. I could use whatever slimming number you've got. Speaking of Sydney FC, flying on Friday night, cruising past the Jets. We'll get on to Newcastle in a moment because there are concerns for them. But your teammate at national team level, Ryan Grant, is just blossoming at the moment. We speak about him every week because it seems like every week he seems to play even better. How impressed have you been with the way that he's kicked on? You knew him when he was at Sydney coming through to the stage that he's at now in a short space of time.
It's amazing. I think he's one of the first players chosen for the Socceroos these days with the way that he's playing. And he's just come back from an ACL as well. To see him continue after an ACL to continue doing so well, it's amazing. And he's a great guy, such a down-to-earth character, and great for our game.
I've said before, Danny, my question about Ryan Grant is why I don't want to see him leave the A-League at all because he's great to watch. But why isn't he overseas? You would have thought that given the form he is in, he sort of dominates pretty much week in, week out. He's playing every minute for the Socceroos. No interest overseas. I'm not saying you're his agent, but you must speak to him occasionally. Why is he not overseas?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I don't know if he wants to go overseas. I know he loves it here in Sydney, so maybe he doesn't have that ambition to. I think I think he can play overseas.
Absolutely.
I think he's a very, very good player and he's good enough to do it, but maybe he doesn't want to.
Can you give us some insight into his character? Because we see on the pitch he's obviously intense and driven, but everyone sees the Ryan Grant laconic character off the pitch, the mullet and the Toyota Corona and the bogan sort of image, if you like, which doesn't always correlate to an intense footballer driven to go and do things like play overseas, even though I'm sure it is in his mind. What's he like in terms of the player off the field that then translates to the quality player on the field?
I think everyone kind of sees it. He's really relaxed. You see it in his interviews after games and stuff. That's how he is. He loves to have a laugh. He's all about the banter and stuff like that, and all about the boys. So, he's just a good character.
Who was the best banter guy that you played with?
I don't want to admit it because I think it's going to go to his head a bit more, but Ryan McGowan. I didn't play with him that much, but spent a bit of time with him in the Socceroos, and he's just always making us laugh. Yeah, he's a funny guy.
Okay.
Who's the worst? Who's the bloke that tries to be funny but it always falls short?
That's a nice guy.
Yeah, I don't know if I should say anyone because I don't want them to hold it against me. But I'll say it, Milos Dejanek. But I still want to shirt Milos.
There goes your Red Star belt. Great shirt.
It's all good.
Milos knows some people. I'm sure he won't be happy about that. The Newcastle Jets aren't happy at the moment.
Yeah.
Wow. You looked at their squad pre-season and we thought there were worries. I mean, you tweeted openly on Friday night, their pressure on the ball was just substandard, wasn't it? Sydney did as they pleased.
Yeah, I said, I think in my tweet, non-existent pressure from Newcastle. It was strange to see. Sydney weren't even really moving the ball around that fast, but they just weren't getting close, and it looked like they weren't interested.
Do you think Ernie maybe made a mistake in starting with young Angus Thurgate? I don't know whether Kantarowski is 100% fit because I think he's just coming back from a slight injury. But it seemed to me that area of the pitch, there were wide open spaces in that midfield area.
Yeah, I think they needed to bolster that midfield area. It was too easy, and yeah, they were playing balls into midfield willingly and opening them up nearly every time. So yeah, I think they really need to fix things there quick.
Having said that, I thought first half they were okay, Newcastle. It was after the break really that Sydney took control, and I think Ernie will be very disappointed that they folded so easily. Great to see Costa Barbarouses get his first goal, by the way. And he's had to wait a while, hasn't he?
It was a beautiful goal, but I mean, it was far too easy. And if you give a Sydney team with that much quality, space and time on the ball, which they had, they'll cut you open. There are problems at the club. We know that the owner wants to sell. That's on the record because of issues with trade. Thank you, Donald Trump, for that. When you're a player and you hear about these things and you can tell that the resources may be drying up a bit, does that start to filter through to the squad and the team a little bit? Is it hard to block out those sorts of things?
I think you try to block it out, but I think the more and more things go bad, I guess it creeps in more. We had issues at Perth Glory when I was there with the salary cap, and as much as you try to block it out, it does find its way in there. So I'm sure that's happening at Newcastle.
Melbourne City Wellington was a cracker yesterday. Unfortunately, there was controversy over VAR, which we'll get into. But a big win for Melbourne City, considering Jamie McLaren has been on absolute fire lately. He wasn't there, out for 4 to 5 weeks, and they still put 3 in the back of the net. And a young player like Connor Metcalf is looking good. Same with Dennis Jondro. So a big win for them. Wellington, I mean, zip from 4, but they've been better than that, and they were hard done by yesterday. So it was an entertaining, fiery fixture in Melbourne.
It was. I feel a bit sorry for Wellington, I have to say. Saw their game, call their game in Sydney where really they deserved more than to leave with nothing. And again, I thought yesterday they were, arguably worthy of a point. They've been competitive in every single game, but for whatever reason, it's just not happening for them at the moment. But, I mean, let's be honest, it doesn't help when you get decisions like that for the penalty.
Yeah, I have to agree with Louis Fenton, how he summed it up. With poor Archie, he didn't know how to handle what was coming his way. But, we play the game at normal speed, and then we're slowing it down frame by frame to see if the balls touch the arm.
Not a fan of VAR then?
Look, it has helped my team sometimes. It has gone against us, but when you kind of get scared. You score a goal and then you don't know if you're celebrating. You're scared if they're going to disallow it. So I'm not a fan of it.
Have you ever sworn in an interview or wanted to swear and held back? Been in a situation like Louis Fenton was in yesterday?
I don't think I have, but I can understand. You could see he's just purely frustrated, and I understand. I hope he doesn't get in trouble, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
It's a tricky one because you don't want to fine him because everyone can see that, the emotions understandably had come to the boil. At the same time, you don't want athletes to think it's okay if they're in that moment to just swear on television because there are kids watching and that. So it's a tough one for the authorities as well. They sort of have to draw a line in the sand and say you just can't do that as angered as you may be because it can't be commonplace, unfortunately, as entertaining as it was. And we do ask for passion and honesty, so we do give Louis Fenton leeway in that regard. But yeah, the VAR, look, it's be it here or be it in the Premier League, it seems as if it's getting to a stage now where people are saying it's causing, and you've been on it for a while, I've kind of been in the middle wanting to see how it would play out.
Been sat on the fence.
I have been sat on the fence because I thought there are benefits and it can work well for the game. And I wanted to give it time to see if authorities and referees and fans would all adjust to how it works. But at the moment, it's simply causing too many problems.
The issue here, Garby, and this is what I've been saying all along, is, in round one, we had 6 decisions and there were 6 correct decisions. So everybody goes, oh, well, look, all the decisions were correct. Well, that's true. My issue was the amount of time that it was taking. And I knew that it only takes one to be contentious because now this is the expectation from supporters and players. If you're going to have VAR, you get it right, 100%. Football's not like that.
Yeah.
It can't be. It's subjective because no matter how much technology you have in the game, you still need human beings to operate them and interpret them. And as we saw in the Melbourne City-Wellington game, the VAR interpreted that as being a handball. Now, it was never a handball for me, I think for most people, but all it takes is for that person in the booth to say, well, it's not clear and obvious enough for me. Then you've got a whole raft of contention again. Well, what's that solving? No. It's just not solving anything.
I think we use it for the wrong things as well. There was the one Birighitti penalty save. Yeah. We have the linesman on the line whose only job is to see if the goalkeeper steps off the line, doesn't call it, and then VAR picks it up.
And then compounded by the fact that the retake, there were 2 players encroaching into the box, and VAR is not allowed to rule on that. I mean, is it any wonder that fans are confused? Yeah. We're confused.
Exactly.
So I think they need to limit it. If you're going to have it, you've got to limit it. And the one time where you really wanted it in the Sydney derby, we couldn't, it wasn't definitive. Yeah. Was the ball over the line or wasn't it? And they couldn't really tell because we didn't have the right angle. And you've also seen in Europe this week, I forget the teams involved, but I've seen that Andy Gray doing the analysis, and the line the serrated line that they've drawn to show that the guy is offside, the line's not straight. So we still don't know.
And then there was the Firmino one in the Liverpool game where
that's the one. Yeah. That's the one.
I mean, it looked like he was onside, and they've said his armpit was off. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a nonsense. Players' armpits are offside now by a millimetre at most, and we're saying that's offside. Yeah, so it seems to be certainly a lot of people in the UK who have backed it. Guys like Jamie Carragher, Gary Lineker are saying, no, if it's going to carry on like this, it's time for it to go. So we've probably got the rest of the season in Australia to sort it out and make a call. Over there, it feels like they've got the rest of this season, or else the powers that be and very influential people will be saying it's got to go. So it's a fascinating time in that regard.
If I can just quote Johnny Warren, I told you so.
Fair enough. You can claim it. But if it carries on like this, it's simply causing more trouble than it is solving. The Mariners, your old boys, Danny, you mentioned them off the top. So a big win over in Perth. You were saying before, the first time they've won over there in Perth since you were playing, or Matty Ryan was playing in goals for them?
I think when the last time they won in Perth was when I was playing for Perth, so maybe 6-7 years ago. Wow. I'm pretty sure Matty Simon scored a double that day.
And Matty Ryan was in goals for them?
For the Mariners, I believe he was, yeah.
Great for Alan Stajcic. I mean, what he's gone through early on this year, the way in which he lost his job, the things he had to go through as a result. He always wanted to coach men's football, although he wanted to do it after the Women's World Cup. I think that was his next target. It's happened in the most roundabout way and an unfortunate way for him. But all of a sudden he's led the Mariners to probably their biggest win in the last, what feels like the last 3 years.
Absolutely. And you can tell that they're much better organised defensively. Look, I don't think they're going to win the A-League, but I think they're going to be certainly better than they were the last few seasons. That's not going to be hard, let's be honest. I think he's got some real quality in Milan Djuric. What a player he looks. And I think I've said this before, but he strikes a ball. The only other guy I can remember in the A-League that struck a ball so sweetly was Nebojša Marinkovic from Perth Glory. When he hits it, it travels like an arrow, and he struck the base of the post again against Perth Glory. He looks a real talent. Danny De Silva was really good against his old club. Now, the challenge for Danny, and really should have had a hat-trick. He scored one, but he should have really scored a treble. He's got to produce that on a week-by-week basis. We know he's got the ability. There was one little passage of play in the first half where he got the ball in a very tight area. There were two or even three defenders around him. And he used his deft footwork to get out of a hole, which is absolutely brilliant. That's what we remember, the potential of Danny De Silva as a teen. But he's got to show it more often because, unfortunately, he doesn't at the moment. You must have played with Danny?
Yeah, at Perth Glory when he was coming through, and he was incredible, an incredible talent, and we thought would really go on with it.
Why hasn't it happened for him yet?
Maybe
still can, obviously.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe the move overseas was too much too soon. I think he needed to be playing regular football in that period, and probably wasn't. So I think maybe with some regular football at the Mariners, we're going to get the best out of him.
Just want to go off on a slight tangent there because you mentioned that, the wrong move overseas. Now, you made a couple of moves overseas. Earlier on in your career, you went to Konyaspor in Turkey. Yep. You went to Vegalta Sendai in Japan with Graham Arnold. You barely played for either club. That must be hugely frustrating when you've got this big move overseas. You think, right, finally, I've got my chance. Yep. And then you don't play. Yeah,
talk about wrong move at the wrong time. I've done it twice in my career, and you go over, you have great expectations. You want things to work out perfectly, and they don't for whatever reason. Turkey was a shambles. I just the whole time I was there didn't feel right, and it turned out it wasn't right. And Arnie got the sack after a few weeks, and that was my time.
That was at Vegalta.
At Vegalta, yeah. So you have to be lucky as well with your move, and of course you have to do well once you get overseas.
In Australia, you always came across as a hugely talented goalkeeper, and I think everyone always said Danny Vukovic could play overseas. And then they would add this little caveat, but maybe he's too short to play in this league or that league, and you've proven them all wrong with the way in which you've gone in Belgium and for the national team when you've been given opportunities. But what did you make of that when people would say that, but maybe he's too small to play here or there?
Yeah, I didn't really think too much of it. I think I was also thinking I could go overseas and then it never worked out going to Turkey and then to Japan. And I think the moment I stopped worrying about going overseas, that's kind of when it all happened for me. But I always had the belief that I could do it regardless of my size. I am 6'2", so
you're not exactly small.
It's not that short.
You were 32, I think, before you made your professional debut for a club in Europe or overseas. Yeah. Did you ever get to the point where you think this ain't going to happen?
Yeah, I don't think I openly thought about it, but I think once you get to your late 20s, even mid-20s, and you sort of haven't made it overseas, I guess you start thinking it's not going to happen. And for it to happen at 32, I don't think anyone really would have called it. And then I made my debut for the Socceroos at 33, so it's been incredible.
Despite this injury, do you feel as though you've got several years left at that stage, though, as if almost you're a bit of a late bloomer? I know keepers can play a lot later, but you might have hopefully 3 more years at least over in Europe.
I hope so. I think I can. I think I've done well in my few years that I've been in Belgium. I got Player of the Season in my first year, won the championship in the second year. So I'd like to think I've done enough to stay there, but you just never know in football what will happen.
Hopefully it continues for a while because everyone's very proud of what you're doing. The only 2 teams you didn't play for in Australia are Western Sydney and Brisbane, which is fitting because that was probably the worst game of the weekend.
And really, Danny should have played there because he is from Western Sydney. Yeah. But look, it wasn't the best game. Probably not helped by the fact it was a very hot day and windy as well. 5 o'clock kickoff. It felt a bit sluggish. Certainly the Wanderers were sluggish. I think they lacked energy, particularly in the first half. Maybe that was a bit of a derby hangover. I don't know what was the case there. Brisbane really should have won the game. Again, same old story. Created lots of chances, couldn't take them. And Robbie Fowler, strangely enough, one of the world's great strikers, needs to find one. Otherwise, he might have to put the boots back on to actually finish off some of those chances.
I said the only two teams you didn't play for. That's not true. The only game on the weekend in which you hadn't represented a team in that game was the accurate way of saying it. But it wasn't a classic. That being said, Western Sydney stay unbeaten and a decent result for Robbie Fowler on the road. It seems as if they're trying to build this fighting mentality there at Western Sydney. And Daniel Lopar, the goalkeeper there, is sort of catching a lot of people's attention. He's been arguably the keeper of the season so far. Have you seen much of him? What do you make of the way he's gone about it?
I've seen a little bit and I have been impressed. I saw there's been a bit of talk about not having foreign keepers, but I don't see why we shouldn't when we have guys like him and is it Curto from Western United? They're doing so well. It's nice to see, and the young goalkeepers here can learn from these guys with European experience.
I know Graham Arnold is concerned about it though, because it's it's not just Curto or Daniel Lopar, but you've got Max Crocombe, who's a Kiwi at Brisbane. You've got Glenn Moss, of course, who's a Kiwi at Newcastle. You've got Stefan Marinovic, who's a Kiwi at Wellington Phoenix. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of opportunities for Australian keepers. And when you've only got an 11-team league, I suppose his concern is when you, Matty Ryan, Mitch Langerak, Andrew Redmayne, who's a similar age, maybe a year or two younger, but maybe you've got 4 or 5 years left, and then what?
I can understand that, but where do you start? I think we don't have many strikers at the moment playing, starting. I think there's a lot of foreign strikers, but we're not going to stop the foreign strikers coming over as well. So I don't know. It's a difficult one to say, but I think the young goalkeepers that are working with Daniel Lopar and Curto, they can learn from them as well.
We did have a question about that because it's a pertinent talking point in Australian football right now on that issue. But this stage aside, our production line of keepers over the years has been unbelievable in Australia. Is that, and I've heard certain keepers talk about it like Mark Bosnich and Mark Schwartz, and they feel it has to do with the fact that you're exposed to so many other sports as a kid, hand sports like rugby or footy or basketball or whatever, that you actually develop faster than kids from other countries because they only play football. Was that the case with you? Were you exposed to other sports and that helped your progression?
Yeah, 100%. I grew up playing rugby league, cricket, with the friends, of course, football. But you're exposed to these sports. Some of them are pretty rough sports. You've got to be pretty crazy to get your head in there and tackle someone playing rugby league. So I think it helps us develop our goalkeepers.
Bit of a myth that they don't play other sports overseas. No, basketball, handball, cricket in the UK, rugby union, rugby league.
They certainly do. But if you look at Australia and America, for example, you look at the amount of Aussies and Americans who have made it in overseas leagues compared to the amount of players in other positions, the percentage is incredibly high because they are exposed to so many other sports. So in that particular position in those countries, there seems to be something in it. Compared to the guys in other positions and things like that. So, yeah, it's interesting. Of course, they do in other countries as well. But in Australia, it's obviously an advantage for our keepers playing those other codes. It helps the hand-eye coordination and therefore the progression. It also helps when you've got a goalkeeping coach like John Crawley. And he's had such a big influence on guys like you and Matty Ryan, as you said before.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through what he's meant to your career?
He's my mentor. He's been everything for my career. And I'd say Matty would... say he's done a lot for his career, but not only us, Andrew Redmayne, look how well he's doing now. I think even a player like Liam Reddy, after his time at the Mariners with John Crawley, I think he took his game to another level. He knows what goalkeepers need. For me, by far the best goalkeeper coach in Australia, and just a wonderful guy as well.
You obviously took his spot at the Mariners because he was, I think, slated to be the number one, wasn't he, when the A-League kicked off? But then I don't know whether he picked up a bit of an injury and you took over and never really looked back. I want to go back all the way back to those early days in the A-League. I'm going to ask you this.
Yeah, here we go.
So the grand final, 2008. You do the infamous hand slap on Mark Shield, the referee. We know you're frustrated because you thought that your team should have had a penalty. Probably should have handball by James Holland, I think it was. That must have been a tough period for you because they robbed you out of the Olympics in 2008 because of that, and you had to serve a very lengthy ban. Do you think it was too harsh?
It's hard to say. I think they had to make an example of me being the first sort of incident of its kind in our game. It was definitely very hard to go through. I think I struggled with it a bit later on. I think in that early period, everything just went so fast. And but yeah, I did the crime. I had to do the time, and you know, it was I think a $10,000 fine as well. I had to go get a loan to pay the fine. I don't think I've ever said that in an interview, but yeah, it was hard on the pocket as well as everything else I had to go through. So.
Did you make it your business to go and seek out Mark Shield? I think it was Mark Shield, the referee.
It was Mark Shield, yeah.
Did you go and seek him out afterwards and apologise or have a conversation with him about it? Or
yeah, it was actually the first game of the next season. He was reffing at the Mariners, and we caught up in the change room. He apologised to me for missing the handball, and I said, you don't have to say sorry. I should be apologising, and I did apologise for what I did. Yeah, I don't think it was, in the scheme of things, a huge incident. I got charged with violent conduct against an official. I don't think, you know, I was trying to be violent to him. It was just something done out of frustration. But he accepted my apology, and I don't think he reffed too many games after that. I think he might have retired that season. So.
I want to go back to the loan because that is interesting. You didn't go to the club first. They didn't offer to help you, and you could pay them back. How did that work?
I think it's going back a long time, but when the fine came down, they said it's something that you're going to have to deal with. So yeah, I had to go get a loan. I was on minimum wage at that time at the Mariners, and I didn't have
$10,000 when you're on minimum wage. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. I think it was about a quarter of my yearly salary. So. But yeah, that's what I had to deal with. Of course, the money side of things wasn't as bad as missing out on an Olympic Games.
So did you go to the bank or did you go to a loan shark? How did it work?
From memory, I think I went to the bank and sorted it out that.
And what do you need the money for, Mr. Vukovic?
I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but
there you go. But yeah, tough time for a young player to go through something like that. And as I said, I think it probably affected me more later in my career.
You've obviously come through the other side of it with flying colours, but that's an interesting story. Graham Arnold was the Olympic coach at the time, so he didn't get to use you in Beijing. It would have been. You've worked with Arnie a lot, with the Socceroos at Sydney FC, where your career went to another level after it was in limbo a little bit, and now with the national team. How are you finding Arnie's progression with the Socceroos right now?
I think he's doing really well. I think he deserves to have this chance. I think we've seen what he's done in the A-League with the Mariners and then with Sydney FC. For me, just a great coach, tactically very, very good. But I've always said with coaches, you need to be tactically good, but I think the man management side of things needs to be just as good. And I think that's where he's one of the best, certainly one of the best that I've ever worked with. He creates an environment for everyone to do their best, not only the players, but all the staff. And he gets the best people around him to help with everything. You got your Andrew Clark's, John Crawley, Dougie Calls, the new video guy, is world class, and Mike Conway, the mind coach, like all these great people working for him, and he's able to get the best out of everyone.
You said that at club level you've got, I think, another year on your contract, which is good given your current situation. Once that is up, I know you were telling us that there's a very promising young goalkeeper at Genk that will probably be pushed towards the first team at some point. If you were to leave Genk, are you still looking overseas? Would you like to play in the Premier League or the Bundesliga, or I don't know, or are you looking to maybe come back home?
It's tough to say. My son's now 4 years old, almost he's going to school there, but sort of primary school or preschool. So I've got to think about the family as well. So maybe come home, but it's hard to say. I think I could stay a few more years in Europe and try to go to a bigger league, but it's just difficult to say.
Is there one that you'd really like to play in?
Certainly the Premier League is the one that I grew up watching, and that would be nice, but it'd be difficult, I think, given my age. I only ever played at Genk, but you never know in football. I wouldn't have said I would have played in Europa League last year or qualified for Champions League this year, so you just never know.
Would you have loved to play with Zlatan Ibrahimovic if you got the chance?
It would be interesting, let's say that. But yeah, he seems like a character, but he's an amazing player. It would be nice if we can get him over here.
Yeah.
Well, you were very prescient last week, weren't you, saying that A-League clubs should go after Zlatan, and Perth Glory went, yep, righto, Garby, we'll do that. You obviously had a hotline to Tony Sage.
I'm not sure if it worked out exactly like that, but the bid is genuine from what I understand. Let's be honest, it's still a long shot. I'm sure the Glory feel it's a long shot, even though they've put in what is
Doesn't matter. I think it's great.
Exactly, I agree. You've got to be trying. You've got to be at the top table. We've seen the youth progression at the moment. It's fantastic. Hopefully there are still talks for promotion, relegation. All these things can still happen in the background with a bit of a cherry on the top, which would be Zlatan coming for be it 6 games or a season, to really generate some excitement and big crowds and big ratings and all the rest of it and a buzz around the competition. So even if they don't get him, we should be doing this consistently for mine, going for the top targets over and over again, because you know how it works in football. Look at the story with Matt Ryan and you. All right, Zlatan let's say, for example, Zlatan says, no, it doesn't work out, but he really likes the presentation from Australia. He then speaks to someone he knows in the game and says, who's retiring, a big name, and says, oh, by the way, Australia, it wasn't for me at the time, it didn't work out. It sounded pretty good, though. Maybe give that some thought. That would work. It would work that way, surely.
100% word of mouth goes a long way, even in football. And I know in Belgium, I'm telling some of the boys, if you ever want to go to Australia, it's a great place to go, good competition, great lifestyle. And I always tell them, like, a lot of the boys that come over, foreigners, end up staying because they love Australia so much. So, I think it's good publicity.
Hopefully it works out, but let's be honest, it probably is a long shot at this stage.
Got to be in it to win it.
Exactly right. We'll get into some more questions with Vuka in a moment, because some of the Twitter questions are interesting. But the Joeys, that was impressive during the week, beating Nigeria, after the draw with Hungary, to go through to the round of 16. There's some talents in that team. Noah Botic, who scored 4 goals in the group stages, and the boy Caleb Watts is really good to watch. Now, I know people are probably going to just about drive off the road when they hear this or reach for their phones and start abusing me. I'm not comparing him to this player at all, or saying that he will
But you're about to.
Or saying that he will have anywhere near the career of this player. If he has half the career of this player, Australian
Go on, who is it? The Australian...
spot. He reminds me in the way in which he moves. That is it.
Here we go.
Got to apply the caveats in Australian football.
Come on, spit it out.
He reminds me in the way in which he moves of a David Ginola.
The Australian Ginola.
There you go.
Just his either side, he's comfortable. He can get the ball. He can cut in from deep positions. He can hit the byline. Comfortable in front of goal. What a goal he scored. He's got a pass on him. Just the way in which he moves, I thought there's a bit of Ginola in him. Of course, I don't think he's going to be David Ginola, people. Calm down. But he really strikes me as a talent.
I like Ryan Teague as well. I think he's got that composure about him and looks to be, obviously a very tender age. He's, a real leader. So what should we call him? The Australian Pirlo? Something like that.
Big shoes to fill.
No, but congratulations to them and to the young Matildas as well.
Do we know who they're playing yet, the Joeys?
No.
Don't think we
Unless
do.
Vuka can tell us.
No idea, boys.
No.
Do you get a lot of pride as someone who's gone through the youth system, watching the young players coming through? Does it mean a lot to you because you know what they are going through right now?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've struggled a little bit with our youth teams over the last few years, so it's good to see them doing well. Trevor Morgan, I worked with a lot at Westfield Sports High School. Good to see him getting the boys wins.
Let's go through some Twitter questions because there are some really good ones. From Joe, a Perth Glory fan, calls himself Joe Economides. What is Danny's favourite Kenny Lowe story or memory?
Memory.
Because we know he's an entertaining guy, Kenny.
Yeah, nothing really comes to mind. I loved how passionate he was about the team and how he rode every moment on the sideline. I'm sure you guys have seen the footage of him trying to kick the ball over the line from the sideline and stuff like that. He's a great character and he's a good man.
From JBit87, this is a really good question, and we do ask players this a lot, and it's great getting the different answers to it. Would love to hear how Vuka views the quality of the A-League now that he's had a European experience to compare it to. Where does it sit in relation to the Belgian League?
Definitely, the Belgian League is a step up, maybe a few steps up. Watching the games over the weekend, I think the big difference is the speed of the game. I think the weather can play a bit of a part in that. We play in a Belgian winter. You can run all game basically. So I think that plays a part. But certainly, quality of players playing in tight areas, it is better. But I don't want to poo-poo the A-League.
Yeah.
I love the A-League. It's been great for me. But of course, there's a difference there.
Could you see the top 2 or 3 teams in the A-League managing in the Belgian League?
I think so. I think they'll find it difficult, but I wouldn't say they would be the worst team in the league. The top couple of teams here, but it is a good league. We have players going to the Premier League. I think 3 or 4 players went this off season to the Premier League. One with Brighton with Matty Ryan and Aaron Moy, Trossard.
I think you noticed, don't you, just going back to that Wanderers Brisbane game on Saturday, it was very hot at kickoff, 5 o'clock, the sun is right in your face, and that has to affect the pace of the game. And then you look at some of the games that are played with evening kickoffs in cooler temperatures, particularly in Melbourne where it tends to be a little bit cooler, and the pace of the game is so much quicker and there's a lot more intensity. It has to have an effect, doesn't it, the weather?
100%. I think that's what the foreign boys struggle with when they first come over, the heat. But not only that, the pitch dries up.
Pitches.
Yeah, in Belgium, for instance, the pitch is wet 90 minutes, so you can zip the ball around it, and it's a fast pace. And here, of course, the field dries out, and it slows the game down.
Couple of quick ones because we're running out of time, but I love this Twitter name, Up All Night to Get Lecky. Okay. Is this supporter who wants to know your opinion on the finals in the A-League compared to the playoff system you have in Belgium, which is rather interesting. How do you compare the two? What do you prefer?
I think I prefer it here. The one in Belgium is a strange one. After 30 games, everyone's points get halved. It was good in my first season because we just made the top 6, so we came closer to the top. But this last season we were on top. I think we were on top by 8 points, and then automatically our points got halved. So I much prefer the playoff system here. But again, you have to win that last game of the season to be champion. So it's tough. I've only done it once, so it's not easy. Exactly
right. And one final one from Marcus. Hey, Vuka, on the topic of active support, having played in front of the Cove, how do you rate the support compared to that in Belgium? And also, which aspects of support in Europe would you bring to Australia? Which sorts of things?
It's good here, but it doesn't really compare to over there. I think over there it's religion. Football's religion. The way that the fans support the game, the authorities are a little bit more relaxed. They're allowed to bring flags in. Sometimes flares go off. Not condoning that, but they're a lot more relaxed with that over there. But I think it's good here, and the more numbers we get to the game, the better it will be.
It's a bit more organic over there, isn't it? The chants are sort of more spontaneous, and it feels as though it's part of the DNA. Whereas we're probably still building that a little bit. Certain clubs have it better than others in the A-League.
It sometimes feels a little bit forced in certain ways, but it's how they're brought up watching football, playing football, and it's part of their DNA. Yeah.
We'll leave the Premier League for next week because there's a massive game coming up. Liverpool against Man City, 6-point gap at the top. We know there are problems for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Unai Emery. Emery could be gone this week. It wouldn't shock if that happens. Ole Gunnar, their worst start to a season since 1990. We've said that about 5 times this year. So the minute you think United are moving forward, they drop back again. So we'll get into the Premier League in more detail next week with that massive game coming up. But it's just been wonderful having Danny Vukovic in. The cameras have been on, and it's great to have a current Socceroo in the studio to talk through his career with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Danny.
Cheers,
really
guys.
Interesting stuff.
Good luck with the injury, mate. We want to see you back out there as soon as possible. You were flying, and no doubt you'll get back to those ways when you return from the Achilles problem. So good luck with the rehab and recovery.
Thank you. Cheers.
That's been Danny Vukovic on the Fox Football Podcast. Simon Hill, thanks to you.
Thanks, Garby.
Thanks to Nick Bruce, who's been running the cameras. You can watch it on the Fox Football website and probably on KO Sports as well.
Wow.
I think we'll upload it. So if you want to see Vuka in the flesh, then you can watch him there, and there'll be some parts on Fox Sports News as well. Thanks to Phil Pryor for putting it together. Thanks to you all for listening. Adam and friends will be back during the week, but this has been a special edition of the Fox Football Podcast. We trust you enjoyed.